So Google has taken the stage last week to announce its newest lineup of Pixel products, and among which, I have had the chance to try out the new Pixel 7 and the Pixel 7 Pro for the past few days. Well, my thoughts? It's alright. For context, I'm a long-time user of Pixel phones, from the Nexus 5 to the original Pixel, the Pixel 3, and then finally to the Pixel 6, so I'm mainly coming from that point of view. So without further ado, we have two phones here to talk about today, so let's get the design and specification out of the way. The 7 and 7 Pro retains their familiar visor design as the 6 and 6 Pro, but updates it slightly. Instead of a piece of glass over the cameras, it's now a piece of metal with cutouts for the camera lens, which curves around the visor to the sides of the phone. The metal piece also has the same finishing as the sides to give it that unified look. Similar to the 6 and 6 Pro, the 7 has matte finishing on its sides and now its visors as well, while the 7 Pro has a much shinier glossy finish which attracts fingerprints like no other. Thankfully, Google was kind enough to provide some matching cases to avoid that, but horizontally holding the 7 Pro will still get fingerprints on the visor nonetheless. Other than that, you'll find that the power and volume buttons for both phones are slightly more spaced out now compared to their predecessors. The side curves on the 7 Pro aren't as prominent as the 6 Pro, and on the regular 7, the visors are now placed slightly lower and the screen is much flatter compared to the 6. The overall footprint of the 7 is also slightly smaller than the 6, but you can't really tell unless you have them both side by side. Now, here is where it falls slightly short of expectations. Considering the sleek design of the 6A and how flush and thin the visor is, you'd think that the 7 series will follow through with that. But the visor on the 7 and 7 Pro is pretty much identical in dimension as that of the 6 and 6 Pro. So all things considered, other than the metal housing over the cameras and its slightly different button placement, there's really nothing new here. The 7 sports a 6.3-inch Full HD Plus AMOLED display of up to 90Hz, while the 7 Pro has a 6.7-inch QHD Plus display. The 7 Pro's display is also LTPO with a variable refresh rate of up to 120Hz, and it shows when consuming content or scrolling apps. The refresh rate is constantly adjusting itself to accommodate the use case. The display for the 7 and 7 Pro also has a peak brightness of up to 1400 and 1500 nits respectively, so you won't have to worry about whether your phone can be used under direct sunlight. It can. And like all AMOLED displays, colours are vivid with a good amount of contrast, so all your contents can be enjoyed the way it's meant to. Both Pixels are also fitted with stereo front and side firing speakers, which gets muddy and distorted at high volumes. I usually don't blast my music at full volume anyways, so that's not really an issue for me. But then again, if I do, I usually just get a Bluetooth speaker for it. The 7 and 7 Pro are both powered by the supposedly faster and more efficient Tensor G2. Despite that claim, the numbers I got from Geekbench weren't entirely satisfactory as there were barely any improvement over the original Tensor. But we are just talking raw numbers here. Lower numbers don't necessarily mean that it's a bad phone if the software is optimized. Well, is Android 13 optimized? Safe to say, it certainly is. During my time with it, I've experienced little to no hiccups and bugs aside from the one time when Google Assistant just outright ignored my voice command to open YouTube Music. Other than that, it has been a pleasant experience so far. Not particularly new coming from my Pixel 6, but still pleasant nonetheless. The Tensor G2 also brings about some computational photography improvements, supposedly processing image faster. Not entirely sure about that, as the only noticeable change I could discern when using side by side with my Pixel 6 is that the night sight is much faster. Like, you could actually tell it's much faster. Other than that, the 7 and 7 Pro also brings about several new features, such as Photo Unblur, which uses AI to sharpen blurry images. While it didn't work as well on this photo of the ROG mouse, it did sharpen this blurry photo of a bowl of pasta quite well. It's still rough around the edges though, but with further development, this could potentially be one of the most interesting features yet. Another is the guided frame, which uses the talkback feature to let you know if you're framing your selfies right. It's more catered towards blind and low vision users, and it performs just as it sounds, so let's just move on. You can now type emojis with your voice by using the appropriate expression followed by the word emoji. While it won't work for every emoji and the term has to be very specific, it could be quite a useful feature if you dictate your messages a lot instead of typing them out. New features that will be coming at a later time also includes transcribing for voice messages, speaker labels for the recorder app, clear calling, and built-in VPN service which Pixel 7 users can access for free. But amongst all, my favourite new feature is definitely Face Unlock, a very welcome addition as we slowly phase out the donning of masks in Singapore. And it's something that my Pixel 6 couldn't do. Now, let's talk cameras. The Pixel 7 is kitted with a dual 50MP main and 12MP ultra wide, while the 7 Pro has an additional 48MP telephoto. Although the colours are similar and true to life across both phones, the images produced by the 7 Pro do have a slightly stronger contrast. Shots taken on any of the lens's native focal lengths also remain sharp as far as smartphone standards go. With the 7 Pro, you also get an additional macro focus which allows you to get up close and personal with subjects. Not all subjects play nice with this function though, as this particular shot of my Gengar keycaps is totally overprocessed. So is this shot of an artificial plant taken within our studio with controlled lighting. The cameras also saw some feature updates on the video sides of things, such as cinematic blur, 10-bit HDR, and speech enhancement for 4K recording. Here are some 4K samples with speech enhancement and 10-bit HDR. Have a look. This is a 4K test footage from the Pixel 7 Pro without 10-bit HDR and speech enhancement. This is a 4K test footage from the Pixel 7 Pro with speech enhancement and 10-bit HDR on. With cinematic blur, subjects that have a rougher edge or tend to have erratic movements generally have trouble being effectively blurred out. For subjects with finer edges like flowers though, it will work just fine. And with that, let's talk a little about the gaming experience. Despite the lackluster Geekbench numbers, the Tensor G2's 3D Mark numbers look generally alright, although it's right below its competitors with the Snapdragon SoC. Less intensive games like Pokemon Unite will of course run just fine. It's even able to run more demanding games like Diablo Immortals at 60 frames per second over a sustained hour-long session without any hiccups, and I'm speaking for both phones. However, the Pixel 7 will get extremely hot to the touch, especially around the sides and visors as compared to the 7 Pro, so that's something to take note of. Lastly, it also performs superbly in terms of battery life. I started at 100% in the morning at about 10 AM and ended the day at about 10 PM with about 15% left, with interval usage of photo taking, gaming, watching YouTube, and listening to music. The Pixel 7 was running at Full HD 90Hz, while the Pixel 7 Pro was at QHD 120Hz, both with Bluetooth and location on. Your mileage may vary though. The phones are now available at official and selected retailers in Singapore and starts at 999 Singapore dollars for the 7 and 1299 Singapore dollars for the 7 Pro. Both phones come in Obsidian and Snow with an additional unique colours each, Hazel for the 7 Pro and Lemongrass for the 7. And with that, the conclusion. Is the 7 and 7 Pro worth it? Long story short, if you are a Pixel 6 user like myself, probably not, as you won't see much of an improvement aside from the additional software features. If you're coming from any other phones though, this is very much like how the iPhone is for Apple. You're really in it for the ecosystem, and you won't be disappointed on that front. But between the 7 and the 7 Pro, is it worth the extra $300 for a slightly better camera system, bigger screen, and bigger battery? In my case, not really. How about yours? Thanks for watching my take on the Pixel 7 and Pixel 7 Pro. If you have any questions or comments, do leave them down below, and if you like what you see here, please subscribe and follow us so you don't miss out on our tech related content. Until then, see you in the next one.